Hello, how's it going? You're listening to Born Optimistic. Thank you so much for tuning in again. I'm here with Mike Hanrahan, Stockton's wing. Are we allowed to call you that?
Yeah, that's no bother. Yeah. That's good.
Mike, I have to start by asking you, and thank you so much for coming to Born Optimistic Towers. Where do you sit on the optimism spectrum?
Oh, I'd say I'd be right on top. Oh, I would think so. I've no room for pessimism at all in my life. None. And I really did. That's interesting you asked the question because I don't remember any bad stuff in my life. I've no room in my head, and I've developed this way of, if the good room in my head needs to be filled with positive stuff, so I can't clog it up with bull stuff. So I am very optimistic. Yeah.
And how do you cope if those around you are not of the same disposition?
Um, I'm lucky. I'm surrounded by positive people, but I don't like working with negatives or pessimistic people. I don't like it. I get no. They ruin the energy in a room, So I tend to keep well away from them and move on. And I'm glad I've got really positive people around me. You try and drive through pessimism, because if you believe in something strong enough, and I'm at an age now where I think things through before I go with things. So if I believe in it, I know I believe in it, and unless there's a very good reason why we shouldn't do something, then we should power on and not listen to any negative stuff.
And have you always been optimistic, or is it something that you learned? Is it a skill you acquired along the way, or do you think you were born that way?
I'd say my parents definitely were responsible for that because there was 8 of us in the family, 8 kids, and I always say we all of us saw us as 8 black sheep, and because we were very individual people, and we were encouraged to do our own individual and follow our own individual lines. Like we would come from a traditional background of music, whereas when I was 12, I took up the guitar and started singing Leonard Cohen, and I was allowed to do that, and I was encouraged. And my dad would go and buy albums when he got his first record player that he think might suit me, Yet his background was strictly traditional music, but he and then when I left I was working in Shannon Airport as a young guy, and when I left the job, my mum was very concerned, and Dad just said, once he has the guitar, he'll be fine, So I think there's definitely an element of that from my parents that instilled that go out there and do whatever you can, really.
Because for your parents' generation, the idea of being a professional musician wouldn't have really existed as a concept, but they didn't stop you from going down that path.
Not at all, and it was the thing in when I left school. Very few of my class went to college. It wasn't the thing to do in our time. Everybody goes to college now, but you actually had to get a grand pensionable job, a secure job, and you'd head on down the line, and you'd set up a family, and you'd have kids, and that was the rule of thumb. Whereas no, as soon as I always wanted to be on the stage. I've been on the stage since I was as far back as I can remember, because we had a Cayley band as kids when I was 10 or 11 or 12. We were doing local talent shows. So as long as I wanted to be on stage. And when I decided that's what I wanted to do, I was given, they waved me on and wished me well. And I was always there to support and take pride in all the successes we had. And when you're that young, you can't map out where you're going to be in the music. Some people say we were very lucky. Yeah, we were lucky, but we made our own luck as a band and as young musicians. I started my career with Maura O'Connell. She was my neighbour, and she went off to Nashville and became. So it was like it was the right thing for us to do, to go on the road. It seemed always like the right thing.
Was it Clare you grew up?
In Ennis, County Clare, yeah.
Oh, in the town itself. I always had a vision of you out in the wild somewhere for some reason.
Do I have that impression that I'm from the wilds? No. My grandparents had a farm outside Ennis in the wilds, and we spent all our summers there. So I would have huge influence from that point of view. And I would. It was a very traditional way of living. They would have cured all their own meats and killed their own animals and fed and milked cows and whatever. So, yeah, I suppose we had that right.
I'm not just saying it because you're here, but even though I'm from Galway, I think Clare is actually my favourite county in Ireland. There's something about Clare. I don't know what it is.
Well, I couldn't argue against that. And anybody who really knows me would know I never would. I mean, I usually introduce myself as the man from the county that has everything, you know. So but I love Clare. It's my roots, and there's a magic in it. But I like Galway, and I like Cork, and I like a lot of places in Ireland. But Clare is a beautiful place. There's a nice vibe in the place. A great sense of history, and I suppose they were an isolated county in times gone by, and maybe that's where you get this. There's a deeper kind of sense of Irishness about it, with the music, I think, and the people and the folklore. So, and then you've got some really beautiful places like the Burn, which is its own magic. So, yeah, I like Clare.
I think listening to you talk, I think what I probably like about Clare the most, and especially around the Burn, is how little it's changed.
Yeah. Well, the Burn has been protected, which is really great. When I left school, I would say I cut my teeth in Doolin. You know, I spent a lot of summers in Doolin, playing in McGann's pub and kind of learning about life. They have destroyed Doolin, in my opinion. Now, it's there, but when I go back, I don't get the same sense as I did when I was a young guy, where it was a small village full of travellers from all over the world. You know, bringing their stories and their songs and their music. It's kind of commercial. And then there's places like Lahinch, which was a really stunning beach. They've destroyed some of that with their big houses, summer houses. But I suppose that happens everywhere. But there are a lot of areas up on the north coast, beyond Liscannor and all that, which are stunning. And then down the south by Kilbaha and all that area, it's beautiful. So I suppose there's a good sense of place and pride in place with Clare people. But generally, it's a cool place.
And even though you left school and music was the plan A kind of all the way, and we will get back to Stockton's Wing, you had a whole diversion into food, which is just a period of your life that I think you might be wrapping up at some point. But was that ever, like, how did food come into your life, and how did that become so important?
Well, I've always been interested in food, and I became a vegetarian at a very young age, almost like a rebellious teenager. And I laugh sometimes because when I think about some of the stuff I was cooking and watching my family eating their beautiful chops and everything, and Dad always slagging me over that he wouldn't feed what I was giving to the dog, you know. But I always had an interest in food, and then I left home and you have to cook. When you're in a bedsit in Dublin, you have to cook, and I enjoy food. I've always enjoyed the process of food, herbs and spices and different vegetables. So when I was with Ronnie Drew for 10 years, and Ronnie was diagnosed with cancer, and the news was not good at all. And I was wondering, my time, I was the chairman of IMRO as well at the same time, and that was coming to an end. So it was a change in my life, and I thought, this is a good time to try and pursue the food. So I went to Ballymaloe and trained. And I spent 10 years as a chef after that, and I just loved it. And now it's done. The chapter's over.
So you literally went to school. You learned the craft. Well, what was that like?
It was brilliant. It was just so good. And it's a very specialist craft in Ballymaloe. They cook at a different level of cooking and they use really good product, organic product. And their approach is almost like the old French style of food. It was great, and nobody knew me in Ballymaloe, you know. I'd come from a business where I needed to get away from the music business. I was tired of it. I was worn out. And nobody knew me in Ballymaloe, and I started from scratch. And when I came back to Dublin, I started from scratch in the kitchens. I ended up peeling carrots and eventually put onto soups and then onto salads and then onto the front line. So it was a good experience. I'd recommend anybody get off the horse sometimes. Try different journeys. It's good. It's good for the head. It's good for the soul, and really good for the mind.
Did you stay a vegetarian?
Not at all. No. 80s Ireland, vegetarian. I'll give you a sample vegetarian dish in 80s Ireland, early 80s. a plate of wilted green leaves, cucumber slices tinned that had probably been adorning some salmon earlier on the day. You get chopped tomatoes, the lovely coating on them from too much air, and then 2 big wedges of melon as your main course. That was it. And I got that. That was my final vegetarian meal. So I couldn't take any more, no. I used to bring my own food on the road. So
And once you went back, do you have any hankerings at all, or?
I cook vegetarian food. I love it. And one of my favourite chefs is a fellow called Otto Lengi in London. And I went and did a course with him in London.
No way.
Yeah, which was a regret. And then when he visited Ballymaloe a couple of years ago to do a demo, I ended up on his team. So I'm a great fan of his, and I like his food, and he's got really great vegetarian food. So and I remember I worked in a place in Dunleary, and I wanted to take over the salad counter because it was naff. And I turned it into a mini Ottolenghi for 18 months, and we had a fantastic time there.
I love Otto Lenki's food, and he's married to an Irishman, so you never know, he might open somewhere here at some point.
Yeah, we often wonder why he never did. I know once time he talked about doing something in Dublin, but he never did. No. Maybe he would. It'd be great.
I'm not much of a chef myself, but I cooked an Ottolenghi dish over the Christmas, and it was like alchemy. I couldn't believe that I was able to create something that tasted halfway similar to anything Yotam had done.
Well, I think he's got a magic with spices, you know. And he takes his vegetables and he mixes and matches his spices, and then he'll bring all these sauces into play. And I think their philosophy was that they'd come from the Middle East, but they wanted to create Middle Eastern food for the Western palate. And that's what was all their and Sammy, his partner in the kitchen, he's the hidden man behind it all. He's such a great cook himself, but he doesn't take the limelight at all. Otto takes everything, but it's what to do with the food, and then they have a team around them. And there are restaurants in London, really great places to visit, and his books are great places to go and pick out a good recipe.
I love Ottolenghi. So what muscles did you find yourself using as a chef that you were similar to as a singer, songwriter, performer, or what was different in those two chapters of Mike?
I was going to say my jaws, but my jaw muscles. Well, it's a different discipline altogether. But you're certainly on your feet more, and it's very physical work. There's a lot of tension in some of the kitchens, and then if you get the wrong head chef who's shouting and roaring, it just makes for a really horrific day's work. So we tried to avoid that. When I ran my own kitchens, I wouldn't allow anybody shout. Anybody shouted were sent out. Just wasn't allowed. It was just, it brings in negative vibes into a kitchen. So it's a tough business. And I suppose the other thing is, in the music business, we're used to people come to gigs and they're heckling, and you're expected to heckle back and bury them. And when you bury them, the crowd love you. Whereas in the food, if somebody heckles your food, you actually offer them a free meal, you know, and you tell them, sorry, I'm really sorry about that. And that I could never match those two. So, and because I was taught by a couple of great chefs, and one fellow once said to me that if the customer doesn't like the food, it should only be because they don't like from their point of view. We should always give food that is really top class. And he said, and with that, he says, if you think the customer's always right, then that's not our philosophy here. We have to be right. We have to set up the food. If we're true to our food and what we do, then it's the customer's own preferences that will dictate whether they like it or not. And I think that's the way it should be. So there's a big difference in that. Like critics can close a restaurant here, you know, or create stars. In the music business, we just laugh at critics. I mean, we don't. I'm with the great Brendan Behan had a great expression about critics. He said they were like eunuchs at an orgy, you know. And that's my training. So that is my training.
And this whole kind of, Gordon Ramsay being the typical, foul-mouthed, loud, shouty, aggressive, rude, hard-living chef. Where does that come from? Like, it seems to be the default setting, and you said you've done the opposite. But where does all that come from?
But it's inbred in the system, when a lot of chefs would have worked through as apprenticeships through animals, I mean, the first chef I ever met was in Shannon Airport. My first job was as a kitchen porter, and the head chef was a tyrant, complete and utter tyrant. So he'd have been teaching his people that there's good in tyranny and bullying, and it's like the whole system. If you're brought up in that, you think it's cool to shout and roar and bully people and abuse people and demean people, because that's what happens. So that's what it is. It's not that you won't cure that overnight, and having someone like Ramsay on television with all his abuse doesn't help the case at all. It shouldn't be the case. I mean, there's a lot of trouble in kitchen. There was a lot of issues that people have to deal with in the kitchen, and depression being one of them. That people don't deal with that. But thankfully, in the last year or so, there's a lot of discussion going on about it. But if you're being demeaned day in, day out for 12 hours a day, it's going to have an effect on you, and that's why I don't like that. I don't believe it's necessary. If you're under pressure, then get out and take a breath of air. But you should never take it out on another human being. Anyway.
And I met you through cooking, I suppose, in a sense. I've only met you a few weeks ago for the first time at the funeral of a mutual friend of ours, Martin Thomas, who you worked with.
Yes, we had a wonderful time in Ringsend. He opened a place with himself in Venetia. They were working on a TV show, actually, TV documentary of 5 or 6 women changing their careers. And Venetia and Martin were opening this restaurant called the Arts and Parlour. And I went in one day for an interview, and I signed up straight away. And it was such a great place, and Martin was a great man. We lasted 2 years in there, I think. We had a lot of success, but just our location, and there was a few errors made when they opened it up first that always came back to bite them. It wasn't well thought out of at the start. And he'd be the first, if he was around, just to admit it. So I miss Martin, because we had a lot of fun together, and he died far too young. But so our thoughts are with Martin, and it's particularly with Venetia and the kids. It was a tough story. But I think he would have been delighted that when we met at the funeral, you handed me your card and said, "Give me a call." I think he would have approved of that. That'd be Martin's style.
Business cards at a funeral, classy. But in the crematorium, you played this amazing song. I didn't have a clue who you were. You played this amazing song, and it just stopped me in my tracks.
Oh, it's a song called "We Had It All." Yeah, Venetia asked me to sing a song, and the day before I was talking about it, and I just gave her the first verse, and she said, "Oh, that'll be great." And I'd sang it a few times in the restaurant late at night with wine taken and all that. So I think it's an appropriate song. I wrote it a few years ago for myself when I left Stockton's Wing, and Ronnie Drew recorded it with me. And then Ronnie went down to record the song himself on a few occasions. In fact, his last album, he did a version with Mary Coughlin. And it's a song that people ask me to do at funerals or whatever, various things, but it's become a very family song for me, for my own family. It's brought out at all occasions. Do you want me to sing a verse of it?
Go on.
Yeah. It's called "We Had It All." There's a sailor gone to sea. Only he knows how it feels as he bids a fond farewell to all his kin. As he walks along the shore, to his love he throws a rose. I'll return again in winter or in spring. We had it all. We had the best of times. We had a life that dreams are made of.
Gorgeous. gorgeous. And that is going to be the next Stockton's Wing single.
Yes, we've just finished recording. I've finished all the recording, and I'm in Belfast with our banjo player Carl. He's got a studio up there. I've finished that in Belfast next week, and then hopefully get it released. We're going to do our first video. Stockton's Wing on video. I hope they're going to bring bags of makeup. So that should be, yeah, it's good. We're kind of getting back. Stockton's Wing have decided to come back and have another go.
But it's come full circle. Like, that's a song you wrote about leaving Stockton's Wing, and now the band is back and you're back, and it's going to be a Stockton's Wing single.
True, it's funny. Never thought about that at all. That's good. I'm going to use that.
But you guys, like, I remember seeing Stockton's Wing in 1986, playing with the Waterboys in the park in Salt Hill. You played Self-Aid earlier that year. You supported Michael Jackson. Like, Stockton's Wing, when I was a kid, were just like pop, massive.
Yeah, we lived the dream, you know, and we had our first hit single in '82, which was Beautiful Affair, and that kind of took off. And funny, it took a while for it to take off, but when it did, that was it. Our gigs changed. I always remember a gig in Roscommon, and we used to travel with 4 Bose speakers, and we were playing this room in Roscommon, and the single had hit the charts, and suddenly the place was rammed, and the 4 speakers just couldn't cover it at all. It was like a little small transistor radio, and then we knew that was time to move on. So we had great success. I think we definitely had 8 magnificent years in the 80s where we did the Jackson gig, and we played with Prince in Cork, yeah, and we played with Sammy Davis Jr. in Lansdowne Road when he was over with Frank Sinatra and Liza Minnelli. We had the movie The Field. We were in that. There was a lot of exceptional times that we had it, and it all happened around that time. We did all the TV shows in England and BBC. Just we even did a Christmas special with Val Doonigan. I mean, that was the big Christmas night. So yeah, we had a great time.
And why back and why now? Was it you had enough? Was it the food pushing you away, or was it Stockton's Wing pulling you? Like, or are they just unrelated things happening at the same time? Like,
I think they're unrelated. Yeah, they definitely are. In that sense, I had enough of the food. It's not like it's a very physical game as well. And when I lived in Cork in the food, and then when Martin in Dublin in the arts and parlour, was really great. And it was a very organic kind of place to work in, and I was in charge. And then I got a few gigs here in Dublin with restaurants with other people in charge, and I was just kind of a cog in the wheel. And that's not really why I ever got involved in this. I got involved to be creative and give something and be in charge of something. You know, I like control. You know.
Well, you are a lead singer.
Yeah, true. Yeah. Well, I like it's maybe that's what it is, but I like control of it, and I could have always been a musician who sang in a band and just sang ballads or whatever, but it was never that. I'm not that way inclined. So
it's almost in a way that your time as a chef was like Leonard Cohen's time up in the Buddhist temple.
Oh, Jesus. I'd never been in the kitchen even remotely like a Buddhist temple. I'd love one, but no, they don't exist. Total.
But you have a book, you have a food book on the way for next year.
Yeah, I decided to write about it, and I kind of, most of the people, I've played with a lot of different people, music-wise, over the years, with Maura O'Connell, Eleanor Shanley, Ronnie Drew, Leslie Dowdle, you know, Pat Short. All these people, we were connected with food anyway, all of us. Like Ronnie Drew, not that many people know, but Ronnie Drew was an exceptionally talented Spanish chef, you know. He spoke fluent Spanish. He spent a lot of his time in Andalusia. And all his food was Spanish food. And a dinner in Ronnie's house was a spectacular event. And it was perfectly cooked. So I have all his recipes. And I thought, okay, people need to know this. Pat Short is a funny man, but he's very serious when it comes to cooking. And he probably makes probably the best pizza dough I've ever tasted. You know, so There's all those. Maura O'Connell comes from a fishmonger's daughter. She cooks a lot of fish. She's renowned as a great local chef in our area in Nashville. So there was all these connections with food and music. So the book is about like memoir of my life with these people and funny stories and then adding the recipes that we kind of share with each other over the years.
When I worked in RT back in the 90s, Ronnie Drew was always one of the hardest people to call because he was always so hardcore to you. Like, so my image of Ronnie is this really grumpy fecker, and like the vision of him cooking paella and Spanish tortilla, it feels like a different beast.
It didn't take away from his grumpiness. He was very grumpy, but he was my best pal. We were very close. We spent 10 years, the two of us, in a car, traveling around Europe and all sorts of places, and America, and we became really, really close. So I suppose I mopped up a lot of his grumpiness in hotels and on airlines and things like that. But that's what you get. He was the most talented man I've ever met in my life. He was creatively at his element when I was with him because he wasn't drinking. He wouldn't drink for the 8 years I was with him. So creatively he was at the height of his game. And he had written a couple of theatre shows. And I like his grumpiness, I got to really, it's kind of affectionate. I mean, I'll give you an example where in hotels you get these breakfast cards that you write down what you want and you hang the card out and your man collects it. Ronnie would get the card, he'd get his pen, and in thick writing he'd write knife, fork, cup, milk, butter, spoon. And his thing was the amount of times he'd get the breakfast in the morning, something would be missing. And by the time he'd go back down for the accoutrement, so there was a method to his grumpiness.
Who was grumpier, Martin Thomas or Ronnie Drew?
Oh, Martin was a baby. Martin wouldn't hold a candle to Ronnie. No.
And it strikes me, is there something that in the Optimist that helped you to deal with grumpiness then? Even so, you didn't see grumpiness and pessimism aren't the same to you. It's a different type.
No, I mean Ronnie was a good grump, He'd give out about things, and he did give out a lot. And I know I was actually listening to him speaking to people like you on phones, and you'd say, "Oh no, geez, stop," But no, he wasn't. It was part of his. He had very little patience, I suppose. And then he was a central figure to Ireland. Everywhere he went, people dragged off him, everywhere. I mean, there was nowhere safe. The cubicle in a loo wasn't safe, So he was like a treasure that people always felt that they could grab onto. And so I suppose with that comes a bit of irritation, and that's why I put it down to. But to tour with, he was a gem.
I remember when you were touring together, and I'm glad it wasn't just me. I thought I just had that effect on him.
Not at all, no.
And so the last time I saw Stockton's Wing live was 1986, and I hope that 2018 doesn't pass without me getting to see you live. And delighted that you've taken the time to come in here, and thank you so much.
Oh, it's been a pleasure to talk. Yeah, it's nice to have a real chat. Yeah, it's really good.
Thanks a million, Mike. You've been listening to BornOptimistic, and thank you so much for taking the time to tune in. And it's just been a pleasure. And Mike, I can't believe I didn't recognise you that day at the funeral, at Martin's funeral. I was just so awestruck by the song, and so this show is in tribute to the great Martin Thomas, and we'll never forget him.
Fantastic,
great
man. Here.
That was BornOptimistic, and until next Monday, thank you so much for listening.